I was 20 when the door closed behind me for the last time, not with a slam, but with the soft click of a lock turning on a child they were done claiming. That night, the house smelled of roast chicken and wine, my mother's special dinner, but not for me. The table was set for four. I was the fifth, the uninvited. The ghost in the doorway they stepped around when carrying dishes from stove to table. I stood there at the edge of the hall where the carpet turned from soft to worn. My shoes dug into the faded patch by the coat rack, the spot I'd once sat on as a little girl, waiting for my father to lace my boots before school. He didn't look up from his glass now. The TV murmured in the other room. My sister laughed at something on her phone, hair pinned perfectly, like our mother taught her. No one asked where I'd been that day. They knew. I'd packed the small brown suitcase 3 nights ago, hidden under my bed, the same bed my grandmother once slept in when she was young and welcome here. I'd slipped my notebooks inside, my coat, a cracked leather wallet. Nothing else was mine. Everything else was theirs. Mother finally turned. She didn't touch me, she never did unless someone was watching. Her voice was smooth, sweet even, the same tone she used to calm the dog when it barked too loud. If you have something to say it now. I didn't. Or maybe I did, but the words stuck behind my teeth, heavy as stones. So I just nodded once, tightened my grip on the suitcase handle until my knuckles turned white. Outside, the night waited. Cold, but not cruel, not like them. The porch light flickered when I stepped under it, buzzing like an old wasp nest. I paused at the top step, turning my face to the window one last time. Through the glass, my brother was pouring himself another drink. He didn't glance up. I stepped down, the heel of my boot cracking a piece of ice on the walkway. At the gate, I turned the latch, old iron, rust blooming at the hinge like dried blood. I pushed it open, careful not to let it squeal. I didn't want to give them the comfort of knowing they'd hear me leave. At the end of the path, I looked back. The curtains were drawn. The warm yellow light glowed soft and secret inside, guarding all that I was never meant to keep. I breathed out, watched my breath curl up like smoke. In my pocket was a torn scrap of paper, an address, barely legible. A place to sleep. A beginning. A threat if you looked close enough. I will come back, I promise. The frostbitten lawn, the old oak tree, the bricks that had never been mine. Not begging. Not knocking. Not hoping. I will come back owning it all. I turned my back to the house and stepped into the cold. Each step away felt like lighting a match. I didn't drop it yet. I would wait. I would learn. I would become. The place I found that night was nothing more than 4 walls above a tired grocery store. The landlady never asked for my name, just my rent, handed over in damp bills I'd saved from tutoring children who had no idea I was packing up my life between lessons. The room smelled of old paint and yesterday's bread. There was one window that didn't shut all the way, it rattled when the wind rose. No curtains. No rug. A mattress on the floor that sagged when I sat down to unlace my boots. I placed my suitcase beside the mattress. Opened it slowly, as if it might bite inside, only my notebooks and a coat I used as a blanket that first night. I laid there on my side, shoes off, but coat on, staring at the cracked ceiling where a water stain spread like an old bruise. I listened to the hum of the street below, the late trucks, the drunk arguments drifting up through thin walls. I pressed my hand to my chest, right over my ribs, feeling my heartbeat push back against my palm. Soft, but certain, like it was saying, I'm still here. I'm still yours. Sleep didn't come easy. Not that first night. Or many after. I lay awake making lists in my head. What I owed. What they took. What I'd take back, piece by piece, until they'd look at me the way they looked at the things they loved best. The things they couldn't buy back when lost. I thought about my father's hands, the way they drummed the table when he was bored. About my mother's laugh, glassy and sharp, when she told the story of how she'd raised me with so little help. I let each memory carve out a little space inside me, like shelves. Someday I'd fill them. When dawn came, I rose before the city did. I brushed my teeth with cold water from the sink in the hall, pulled my coat tight, hid my notebooks under my arm, and stepped out into the street that didn't yet know my name. Someday it would. Someday they all would. Someday, the ones who closed the door would open it again, only to find I'd taken the key. The grocery store below my room needed hands that wouldn't ask for too much. I became those hands, shelving bruised apples, sweeping broken glass bottles at dawn when drunks tipped over the display. Between shifts, I found the library 3 streets down. It smelled of old paper and rain leaking through the roof in April. No one asked my name there either. They just watched me carry books to the corner desk and fill page after page of my notebooks with a hunger that had no manners. In those months, my coat frayed at the cuffs, my shoes wore thin. But my mind grew teeth. I read everything I could about business licenses, property deeds, loopholes my father had bragged about at dinner parties when he thought I wasn't listening. At night, when the window rattled and my hands were too cold to write, I memorized. I whispered secrets to myself under my breath until they stuck. One day, they'd feed me more than the stale rolls I carried up from the store after my shift. I made no friends. I didn't want to. Friends asked questions, they wanted to share burdens. I wasn't ready to share mine, not yet. So I smiled when the shopkeeper joked that I was quiet as a mouse. I nodded when the librarian slipped me an extra hour after closing. I said thank you to the dark hall when I locked my door each night, my suitcase under my mattress now, a shrine to the day I'd use it again. There were nights I missed them, the warmth of being seen, even if only as something to polish or pity. But each time the ache rose in my throat, I swallowed it whole. Love was a coin they'd spent too freely. I would not beg for their scraps. Instead, I let that ache calcify, harden, become the quiet armor I wore under my coat. When people passed me in the street, girl with the frayed cuffs, the tired eyes, they didn't see it. But I did. And someday, they would too. The first time I touched the papers that would save me, it was accidental. A shipment arrived at the grocery at dawn, crates of overripe oranges, and, tucked beneath them, an envelope with someone else's name. Invoices. Receipts. Numbers that didn't match the register's cough of coins each night. I asked no questions. I just watched. I learned how corners were cut, a shipment rerouted here, a weight miscounted there. The owner laughed about it over stale coffee, never guessing that the girl mopping his floor could read between the lines like scripture. That night, I sat cross-legged on my mattress, the invoice copied into my notebook by memory alone. Each figure a foothold. Each name a door. If the man who hired me could keep his books crooked to feed his children, why shouldn't I learn to straighten my own life by understanding every bent line? Week by week, I found more. Unfiled taxes, forged signatures, whispered payments to keep the inspectors away. I wasn't outraged. I was fascinated. This was how the world turned when no one was watching. The grocery store became my classroom. The alley behind it, my secret study hall. I stayed late under the flickering backlight, fingers stained with spoiled fruit, whispering figures to myself like prayers. Some nights I wondered if this made me cruel. If watching men lie and stealing the shape of their lies for my own end made me just like them. But then I'd remember my mother's smile when she told me to pack my bags, how my father looked past me at the son he loved more. And the guilt would slip away, replaced by a warmth I'd come to know well. Purpose. When the first ledger balanced under my pen, I closed my notebook and pressed it to my chest. I promised myself I'd write my own figures next. On deeds. On keys. On letters that would arrive at their door like ghosts. In the dark, I mouthed the words I would say when they asked how I did it. I wanted to be ready. I wanted the syllables to land like glass dropped from a great height. Silent, then shattering. The grocery store couldn't hold me forever. I knew it the day I found my hands shaking behind the counter, counting coins for a customer whose perfume smelled like my mother's. I finished my shift. I didn't go back the next day. Instead, I took the bus 2 towns over. In the city library, I sat at a cracked wooden desk under harsh lights and filled out forms I barely understood. Permits. Registrations. Bank accounts that needed a name. At first, I wrote mine, the one they'd left behind. But the paper looked wrong with it. Weak. So I used the name I'd whispered to myself when I scrubbed floors and recited figures, my own mother's maiden name. The one she dropped like an old coat when she married for money. I signed it carefully over and over until my wrist ached. Each loop and curl a small rebellion. Each letter a promise that when I returned, they'd hear that name spoken by people who owed me respect, not pity. I worked 3 jobs then, deliveries by day, cleaning offices by night, records clerk on weekends. I lived on instant noodles and the thrill of seeing my bank balance crawl higher. No one asked who I was. No one cared if my shoes were cracked or my coat threadbare. All they wanted was my labor, and I gave it gladly, because each hour bought me a little more distance from who I used to be. In quiet moments, waiting for buses at dawn, steam rising from the asphalt, I pictured the house where they still laughed without me. I imagined my father's shoes polished at the door, my mother's favorite mug beside the stove. And I thought, one day, these little things will be mine to take away. Not out of spite, but because they'd taught me to survive by losing everything first. I saved every receipt. I read every contract twice. I signed my name 1,000 times until the ink bled through the paper. And on my 20th birthday, in a rented room with peeling paint and a single flickering lamp, I celebrated alone. Not with cake, but with silence. Silence that said, "You're almost ready." By 27, my small name on borrowed paper had grown teeth. A tiny bookkeeping service for local shops, nothing more. A polite smile. A steady hand. Behind every receipt I filed away, I tucked a secret. I understood what they didn't want the world to see. Shopkeepers trusted me with whispers, unreported sales, favors traded for silence, debts that never touched the ledger. They called me discreet. Reliable. They didn't know each secret they handed me was a brick in the house I was building inside my mind, the house where my family's pride would one day crumble. It started with the tailor on 5th Street. An old man, half blind, who paid me in fabric scraps and stories about how he once sewed for men far richer than the neighborhood would guess. One night, when he fell behind on rent, I used my own savings to keep his door open. He wept at my kindness, never knowing that I had already memorized the landlord's debt, the building's flaws, the loophole that would let me buy it outright when the time was right. From him, I learned the next step: property. Not just coins in a jar, but walls, keys, titles. The grocery store where I once mopped floors? One winter later, I signed the papers to become its silent partner, the old owner never guessing the girl he'd once barked at now counted his profits from a hidden desk in the back. Still, I told no one my real name. I paid taxes, filed forms, shook hands at city meetings, all under that half-forgotten maiden name my mother once discarded like an old ring. At night, I lay awake imagining my father reading that name in a letter someday, black ink on heavy paper, delivered by a courier who'd wait, hat in hand, for the signature that would surrender the last thing they thought they owned. I never hated them, not really. I just wanted to be the ghost they thought they'd buried. The proof that no silence stays buried forever. So I kept the letter ready, the first draft, locked in a box beneath my bed. A single page that began, "To whom it may concern," and ended with a line that would leave my mother's tea untouched on the table, my father's voice caught behind his teeth. "This property now belongs to me. Always me." When the letter was ready, I didn't send it, not yet. A paper blade must wait for the perfect hush before it cuts. So instead, I let the rumors do the work. It started in the places they still visited: my father's favorite cafe, my mother's tailor, the tiny jewelry shop where my sister once bragged about her engagement ring. Whispers about a quiet investor buying up debts, fixing roofs, paying off overdue loans, always anonymous, always polite. I knew they'd hear it eventually. And when they did, they'd never imagine the owner was the daughter they'd erased with a single slammed door. One spring afternoon, a neighbor called to tell me my mother was planning a grand family dinner, all the children, the spouses, the grandchildren they adored more than the daughter they'd lost. An anniversary. A boast dressed as a celebration. The neighbor's voice dropped to a whisper. "They said you'd never dare show your face." So I did. Not loud. Not angry. I sent back a single RSVP card, white, clean, my name in new ink. No threats. No begging. Just a simple, "I'll be there." And then I bought the restaurant. Quietly, through a shell company. Cash. No fuss. By the time the family gathered under glittering chandeliers and lifted glasses to toast themselves, every chair, every fork, every flickering candle belonged to me. I watched from the corner as they poured wine, my mother's laugh bright as crystal. They hadn't seen me yet, the servers did though. They knew who paid their wages now. I gave them one nod. The plates arrived late. The wine stopped flowing. Small, sour inconveniences. They glanced around, annoyed, never suspecting the hands behind it all were mine. When I finally stepped into the light, I saw my sister's smile freeze on her lips. My father's brow furrow. My mother's hand tightened around her glass so hard I thought the stem would break. I didn't speak yet. I just sat down at their table, the seat they'd once kicked me out of, and lifted my glass to them. I saw the question flicker behind my father's eyes. How did you get here? I said nothing, because the answer would taste better in their mouths when they finally realized they'd swallowed it whole. Weeks after my return, the letter arrived simple, unadorned, yet heavier than any words they'd ever spoken to me. A formal invitation to the family's annual board meeting. No ceremonies, no smiles, just cold ink on thick paper. I knew they expected me to ignore it, to stay silent, to fade away again. But I folded their arrogance into a quiet smile and prepared to enter the room they never thought I'd walk into. The day came. I stepped into the building, polished floors reflecting my calm resolve. Their eyes flickered when they saw me, a mixture of disbelief and unease. They sat stiffly around the grand table, the same one where I'd once been told I had no place. I took the seat reserved for the majority shareholder. Not with fury, but with gentle certainty. The chair creaked beneath me, an old throne reclaimed without noise. I presented the papers, signed contracts, property deeds, business expansions. Each document a silent testament to the years they tried to erase. They listened, their pride unraveling quietly in the face of undeniable facts. No shouting, no blaming, just the steady rhythm of a tide turning, inevitable and calm. When the meeting adjourned, I left behind a signature on their world, a boundary they could no longer cross. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent life, but inside me, the slow burn of justice glowed steady and true. Days passed after the meeting, and the family's world shifted beneath their feet. No words were exchanged, no pleas, no accusations. Only the deep, unspoken understanding that something fundamental had changed. Calls went unanswered. Invitations were left unopened. The table I once longed to join was now mine, but its emptiness echoed louder than any presence. One evening, my sister came to the office, her steps hesitant, her eyes searching for the sister they once knew, or perhaps feared. I met her gaze calmly, offering neither forgiveness nor condemnation, just a quiet strength that said, "I am here, on my terms." She left without a word, but the weight of what was said in that silence settled between us. Not a fracture, but a boundary. Not a closing, but a careful distance. I realized then that true power lies not in shouting or storms, but in the stillness after the storm, when silence itself becomes a message too heavy to ignore. The months unfolded like the slow bloom of a rare flower, measured, deliberate, impossible to rush. I watched the family's empire grow under my hand, not with noise or spectacle, but with patience carved from years of neglect. Every decision, every contract, every whispered negotiation was a thread weaving a tapestry only I could see. The house that once felt like a cage became a sanctuary of calm authority. In its quiet halls, I found not bitterness, but clarity, the kind that turns wounds into wisdom. One evening, as twilight draped the city in muted gold, my daughter took my hand gently. Her eyes reflected a future I was no longer afraid to claim. In that touch, soft and steady, was the promise of a legacy built not on dominance, but on dignity. My family's voices still echoed in the distance, some filled with regret, others with silence. But I no longer needed to answer. I had already spoken in contracts, in calm victories, in the unshakable strength of quiet reign. The corner seat was mine, not because I begged for it, but because I built a throne from patience and grace. And in that quiet reign, I found my true home.